The Buffalo Bills have now fallen short of their Super Bowl aspirations 3 years in a row, and they're getting further and further away from it each year. And as long as head coach Sean McDermott and general manager Brandon Beane are tenured, they'll never reach their potential. I'm McPoon Football, and I'd like to argue that the problems that are keeping the Bills from winning when it counts have been consistent for the entirety of head coach Sean McDermott and general manager Brandon Beane's tenure, and that they ultimately stem from the lack of a cohesive plan. Furthermore, Brandon Beane has drafted poorly, and Sean McDermott's role as a defensive-minded CEO-type culture guy head coach is becoming quickly obsolete in today's NFL. With all these problems in mind, it seems apparent in my mind that it's time for McDermott and Beane's run to come to an end if the Buffalo Bills want to get serious about winning a Super Bowl. The most egregious and exemplary issue the Bills face is a clear disconnect between offensive and defensive schemes. When Sean McDermott took over this organization as a defensive-minded head coach and led an elite defense very early on, nobody expected that 6 years later the Bills would be known for their superstar quarterback and electric offense. But it happened. Josh Allen developed into one of the game's elites, and along with Brian Daboll took over the NFL. The Bills made 20-yard pass plays look easy and consistently dropped nearly 30 points a game. And as this happened, a disconnect quickly grew between the offensive and defensive sides of the ball. Because, you see, Sean McDermott and the Bills were built on a soft, bend, don't break style of defense. That was their thing. It was what led them to early success, and therefore it's somewhat understandable that the staff has become attached to it. But, as the saying goes, insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Let's get into why this defense hasn't been working for the Bills. Since McDermott got to Buffalo, the Bills have run the most nickel defense in the league by far, prioritizing containing the pass and by design being squishier against the run. The idea is that they can limit the big play and will ultimately be able to stiffen up in the red zone, forcing offenses to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. Furthermore, they're not a blitz-heavy team and, again, in a lot of ways could be considered soft. And there's nothing inherently wrong with this approach. It worked for a while in Buffalo, and it has worked on numerous teams around the league. But this defensive approach is not optimal in conjunction with the powerhouse offense the Bills have evolved into. By design, this approach will often allow long, methodical drives from the opposing offenses, especially those that are able to run the ball effectively. Yet, this is the exact opposite of what you want when you have a superstar quarterback. You want your offense, your quarterback, on the field as much as possible. Your game plan all of a sudden needs to change from winning through good defense to winning through good offense. And the optimal defense to pair with an electric offense like the Bills is a man-heavy, blitz-heavy defense that will be more prone to forcing sacks, therefore fumbles, and interceptions, giving your offense more opportunities to convert, which they most likely will. This blueprint has been set in stone by the Kansas City Chiefs, who under Steve Spagnuolo run that exact style of defense with an offense that speaks for itself, and the results have been obvious. McDermott and defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier have not, however, adjusted to their new team composition and strengths. They stubbornly run the same soft zone coverage scheme that is consistently picked apart by good quarterbacks in the playoffs. It plays a lot better against quarterbacks you'll run into in the regular season, like Kenny Pickett or Teddy Bridgewater, but it won't work that well against Mahomes or Joe Burrow. As far as disconnects go, there also exists a disconnect between general manager Brandon Beane and this style of defense. First of all, he spent a first-round pick this year on a man-heavy corner, just for the defensive staff not to utilize him because he was not a zone guy. He also has neglected to address the interior of the defensive line that is so important for this system's success. Just because schematically a base nickel defense will be weaker against a run doesn't mean that that weakness should be submitted to. Beane should be doing whatever he can to get a two-gapping, run-stuffing nose tackle. But we haven't seen him pursue a player of that nature with any merit or talent. There's been constant turnover of mediocre three techniques because they're not the right type of defensive tackle for this scheme. If you're going to have 5 defensive backs on the field, you know you need somebody up front who can really stop the run. Beane has also exemplified a disconnect between the player personnel on offense and the offensive system. The Bills' offense this year, for example, was predicated on moving the ball down the field. Yet, entering the year, the Bills only had Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis who profiled as vertical threats, meanwhile having a plethora of slot options, including free agent signing Jamison Crowder, Isaiah McKenzie, and 5th-round rookie Khalil Shakir. He also spent a 2nd-round draft pick on a receiving back in James Cook, just for offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey not to utilize receivers out of the backfield. Beane's drafting has also been a problem. Not only has he missed on draft picks in general, he's neglected long-standing positions of need, most notably the interior of the offensive line. It's been a weakness for this team for the past 3 years straight. And in fact, in 2021, Brandon Beane spent a 3rd-round pick on tackle Spencer Brown and a 5th-round pick on tackle Tommy Doyle, while neglecting to take an interior guy until the 7th. At this point in time, the Bills' tackles were already set. with Deion Dawkins and Darrell Williams. All that these moves actually ended up accomplishing was eventually forcing Darrell Williams out of the building and downgrading at tackle with Spencer Brown. But let's get into his draft history further. In general, Beane has been failing to deliver on high picks, first to third round picks, outside of 2018, where he nailed it and picked up Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmonds in the first, and even acquired Teron Johnson, who's been great in the fourth. And that was Beane's first draft with Buffalo. But let's get into every draft since. In 2019, at number 9 overall, Beane selected Ed Oliver. Ed has been alright for them, but definitely not worth the number 9 overall pick. And a quick caveat, by the way, this is not an example of him trying to beef up the defensive line, because Ed Oliver never profiled as a run-stuffing type. In the second, Cody Ford, bust. In the third, Devin Singletary, who's good but replaceable, and Dawson Knox, who has been a good pick. In 2020, AJ Epinesa in the second, bust. Zach Moss in the third, bust. In 2021, Gregory Rousseau in the first, good. Boogie Basham in the second, bust. Spencer Brown in the third, bust. And finally in 2022, Kaiir Elam in the first, not a scheme fit. James Cook in the second, not a scheme fit. And Terrell Bernard in the third, who everyone questioned at the time, and I still do, because he sucks. These are entirely underwhelming drafts when it comes to the talent acquired, but even more so when you realize that he has not addressed guard since 2019. Beane has passed up on this position of need just to draft unproductive players, which often seem to be slow, unexplosive defensive ends for whatever reason. Lastly, Sean McDermott's role as a culture guy is becoming obsolete in today's NFL. When McDermott was hired as a head coach in 2017, this promise to bring in a winning culture was a large part of his selling point. And culture guys can be very valuable when it comes to building up an organization, as Sean McDermott was, or how Dan Campbell is right now for the Lions. But if your head coach, who's ultimately gonna be the guy that calls all the shots around your organization, is not excellent schematically, taking that rebuilt team over the hump is gonna be an uphill battle. I don't mean to say that a good culture is unimportant, or that Sean McDermott hasn't built just that. I mean to say that it's an overly glorified statement to be viewed as a culture guy, unless your name is Mike Tomlin. The defensively minded culture guy, or CEO type of head coach who doesn't build or call the offense is destined to let excellent offensive coordinators leave to head coaching gigs. And in a case like Buffalo where that coach is employing an inefficient defense, McDermott's position as head coach has had an adverse effect on this team. This is most obviously apparent with the Buffalo Bills being forced to recently let walk Brian Daboll, who is now going to go on to win Coach of the Year in his first year with the New York Giants. When it comes down to it, the NFL is an offensive league nowadays. A great offensive mind is more valuable than a great defensive mind. All in all, the Bills staff has done a poor job as of late and takes on a lot of the blame for the team's recent shortcomings. While they did well to build this team and turn it into a team winning 12 or 13 games a year, they have not done enough to elevate their team over the hump and turn it into a true contender. And personally, I don't think they ever will be enough to get the Bills over the hump. Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier are deep-rooted in their defensive philosophies. The disconnect between the player acquisitions and the team/schematic needs seems too grand to fix in one offseason, especially with no cap and no high draft picks. And I wouldn't be surprised if one offseason is all these guys get to fix it, if and when the Bills fall short next year for the same reasons they have been. I don't think the Bills will move on from these guys this year. It takes a real ballsy and forward-thinking owner, which Terry Pagula is not, to do such a thing when the team is still winning games. But I do think he'll be forced to next year, when the same problems pop up and cause the Bills to lose in the playoffs again. And when he does, he'll have wished he had done it sooner, because he should have done it sooner. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott cannot be the guys to take the Buffalo Bills to the Super Bowl. With that being said, that's all I got, guys. If you made it this far, please subscribe, like, comment, share it with your friends. I appreciate you guys for watching. Let me know down in the comments what you agree with, what you don't, if you're as done with McDermott and company as I am. But yeah, guys, take care and peace out.